Hello and welcome to the For Pete's Sake podcast. I'm David O'Connor with eXp Realty,
And I'm Alex Blencarn with eXp Realty.
and today we're going to be reviewing the Peterborough City August 2023 market stats. And we've got our deal of the month, tip of the month, and then we actually got some big news coming out. Bank of Canada met and some other news. Little disclaimer: this is going to get a little macro, so get that caffeine in you. Alex, how you doing?
Good, man. Good. Trying to stay cool. We had the Labor Day weekend just this past weekend, and it was a scorcher out there. So it's weird. You still got the AC running in September, which, I mean, can't complain. Kind of the last weekend of summer, so it was nice. Got to spend a lot of time with family, so can't complain. What about you?
Oh, you're right. We got fall weather in August, and then we get the hot weather at the beginning of September. No, it's good.
Yeah.
I'm in my basement. AC's cranked. It's nice and cold down here. And we got the pool now, which is great. So we'll probably pop out for a dip with the fam later.
Nice.
So, Alex, before we get into the stats, there's some big news. Bank of Canada met. We can start with that. And then I know you got some other big news as well.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit of macro here. I know everybody loves it. So the Bank of Canada met on September 6th at 10 a.m. and they decided to hold their policy interest rate at 5%. So great news there. No increase. Again, that Bank of Canada policy interest rate affects your variable rate mortgage, and the bond yields actually affect your fixed rate. So your variable rate, I believe, is still around 7%. But definitely consult with a mortgage professional to get an exact number. And I believe your fixed is kind of around 6% right now. Now, in the Bank of Canada's press release, they mentioned they held their policy interest rate for a variety of reasons. The first reason they pointed to was the GDP number, which came out for Q2, and we actually shrunk by 0.2% year over year in quarter number 2 for 2023. But it actually had no change quarter over quarter. So it was a 0% change according to Stats Canada. That's the number that was reported on their website quarter over quarter. So between the first 3 months of 2023 and the second 3 months of 2023, there was 0% change quarter over quarter. Again, keep in mind a recession is classified by 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. So we're at 0% as of Q2 2023. They also cited inflation data was averaging around 3% for both June and July of 2023, which was in line with their projections. So I believe they came out with their monetary policy report where they projected that they were hoping to get inflation at 3% by the end of the year. I believe that was in the report. We'll link the report down below so you guys can take a look. But they cited that they were kind of on target with their 3% average for June and July, so they decided not to increase their policy interest rate. So some good news there. Any thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, it's kind of mixed. It's good that they didn't increase rates, but there's still, some narrative there about some doom and gloom. So it'll be interesting how the market's going to respond. I'm hoping it doesn't snuff out our fall market. The rate hike not going up, that's going to help a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks if we're going to have a traditional fall market.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's going to be kind of the saving grace of 2023 because things really were quite quiet this summer, especially kind of July and August. Things were pretty quiet. So we'll get into that. But there was another huge piece of news which kind of dwarfs the Bank of Canada news from a gentleman named Benjamin Tal, who is the deputy chief economist for CIBC. And he came out with a report at the end of August, and it was a population report aimed at Statistics Canada. So the report contained a few key items. There were 3 of them. The first key item was that in 2013, Statistics Canada had estimated that there would be 38 38.7 million people in Canada in 2023. That's 38.7 million by 2023. That was Statistics Canada's estimate back in 2013. Again, there have been 2 censuses or censi since then because they release about every 5 years. So I believe there were 2. The actual number was 40.2 million. So that was a misestimate of 1.5 million people. Now, the reason this is important is because generally when you're allocating housing for Canada, they will look at these population estimates from Statistics Canada to determine how many permits they need to issue and how many homes they need to build. Because as we know, you don't just get a permit and you can throw up a house next week. Generally, these projects, especially the major subdivisions, can take, between 5 and 10 years. So when we're looking at population estimates back in 2013, and maybe we're using those numbers in 2015 when we're deciding how many permits and homes to build, we look at that 38.7 million people and we go, yep, let's build enough homes for that number of people. The problem is there were actually 1.5 million other people that they missed out on. So it's really important because this population forecast is used for planning, budget allocations, zoning for real estate. And if you're undercounting, you will not have a plan in place to house those 1.5 million residents. So a huge finding in that report. That was finding number 1. Now stay tuned for number 2 and number 3. But any thoughts on that, Dave?
That's a huge miss. I'd love to know the full story behind that. But yeah, if you 1.2 or was it 1.5?
1.5.
1.5 million people that need to be housed that they didn't account for. That can greatly impact our economy. Definitely real estate.
Yeah. So again, this relates to real estate because of supply and demand. And if there is a large number of people that are without housing, it's going to affect the demand greatly. And that large number of people could be close to 1 million, according to finding number 2 and number 3. Finding number 2, again, the census from Stats Can is released every 5 years. And Benjamin says that they're undercounting non-permanent residents and foreign students by about 250,000 people. The problem with this is CMHC uses this census data, again, for projecting housing demand, and then that CMHC projection is used by the municipalities when they're planning subdivisions and creating zoning bylaws for the different areas of their municipality. Finding number 3, temporary visas were not being counted. So Statistics Canada, the way that they count those temporary visas is they assume that 30 days after your visa expires, you're going to leave the country. And because of this, they do not count you in the population. So think about an international student that comes to Canada. They come to Canada, they finish their schooling, and now their visa is up. It's going to expire in 30 days, but they want to stay in the country. So they're going to apply for either a work visa or potentially extending their visa or apply for that permanent residency. Stats Canada does not count these individuals in their population demographic calculation because they assume that they're going to leave the country 30 days after their visa expires. So Benjamin Tal estimates that there are 750,000 individuals that meet this criteria. That's a total of around 1 million people that were not counted in our population data. Now, what I find really interesting about this is Stats Canada's response. They came out publicly after this report was released and said and stated publicly that they are going to revise the way they count non-permanent residents and will be adjusting the number from their 2021 census with this new methodology at the end of September 2023. So they saw this report, essentially admitted that Benjamin Tal was right and that we did undercount our population. And they're working like rabbits to try and get this number revised from the 2021 census. Again, essentially admitting that Benjamin Tal is correct with this population data. So really alarming there, because essentially that means that there are potentially 1 million extra people that we have not accounted for in our housing development projections. So when they're looking to create housing development, they're going to say, okay, yes, we've got 40.2 million people in the country, and we need to house this many people this year. So we need to build X number of homes. The problem is they missed that number by about 1 million people.
It's not good. Yeah, just
Not good.
so many people rely on that data. There's not much room for error. And as you're saying, it comes all down to supply and demand. What happens if you're unaware of the real demand? So,
And that's the issue. That's the issue is these municipalities that are budgeting where they're going to spend their resources, where we're going to put subdivisions, and they're deciding, okay, we need to house, let's say the population, I believe it grew by about 1,050,000 this year. They're saying, okay, we need to house those new 1,050,000 residents. Problem is that number is actually closer to 2 million as per Benjamin Tal. So that's an extra million people, double what Statistics Canada reported in terms of population increase year over year. So that is extremely alarming.
And what's going to be interesting is a lot of the other market indicators are pointing towards our first buyer's market. 2024 may be a majority buyer's market, but something like this, if there's an extreme demand for housing, we might be slipping back into seller's market. It's interesting times.
Yeah, essentially, I mean, you've really got kind of two camps with your housing projections, and when you're looking in that crystal ball, you've got the camp of population growth, and that we are not building enough homes to house these individuals, therefore putting pressure on the rental market and eventually the resale market. Then you've got the other camp that says, okay, well, interest rates are way too high, and people cannot afford these $1 million homes because there's no way they can qualify for them based on their current average household incomes. So you've got those two separate camps with kind of opposing views, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Maybe it plays out somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's a balanced market. Who knows? It's tough to say.
You might have to give better incentives to builders.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other topic. We won't get into that now.
Yeah. All right, so there you have the news, guys.
Yeah.
So if you've made it this far, we are going to get into the Peterborough City August 2023 Market Stats. And of course, then we'll have the tip of the month for you and the deal of the month.
Yeah, so we got 22 versus 23 here for August. The average sale price increased by a little bit, 1.5%. New listings increased by 24%. Number of sales decreased by about 13%, and days to sell actually decreased by 31%. So that's a pretty huge change. In terms of the month over month change, we saw the average price decline month over month slightly. Same with the number of sales that went down month over month. Same with days to sell, that was down month over month, and listings were about the same. So kind of decreases in all statistics. They were only slight decreases, as we'll see, but definitely decreases in all of the 4 statistics that we like to track. So any thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, well, I guess you got days to sell have decreased to 30%, which is pretty significant. But again, this is year over year. I feel like the real story and the meaty stuff to get into is these month over months coming up here. I feel like they really tell the story of where our market's at right now.
Yeah, and looking for trends. So there you can see, I mean, it's not a huge change month over month. I think it was a decline of around $10,000, but certainly a decline, but I mean, nothing really major there. So yeah, there you have it. It was, 653, and we're at 646 for August. So not a huge change there, but definitely a decline month over month.
Yeah, just a slight decline. And we'll get into it in a few slides from now, but I actually think prices are declining more than that, and they're a little obscured.
New listings, again, relatively the same. I think we had one new listing change month over month. So I think we were at it was 148, and we're at 149 for August. So relatively the same market in terms of inventory that is listed. So homes that are newly listed for the month.
Yeah, again, that's consistent with a traditional market where the summer months are a little sluggish, like July, August do tend to be similar months, and then you get that nice pop in the fall. But yeah, that looks pretty consistent. That's why what's really interesting about this year is there's a lot happening, but the end result is looking very similar to a traditional year. But there's a lot of variables driving it that are not consistent with what's driving the market in the past. So it's that's why I'm thinking, I don't know, hoping and excited for maybe a big fall market.
Yeah, and again, to touch on your point there, it could be those two camps and kind of just meeting in the middle, where maybe there is a heavy demand, and that's kind of causing a floor in the housing market. Because yes, interest rates are high, but there are still many buyers out there that need and want housing. So that's what we could be seeing, and that could be keeping the housing market afloat.
Yeah, and I think if it's a lot of international student related, and then it's going to be those investment type properties too.
Yeah.
We'll see, like, and we got lots of those up here. People have been loving our market for years.
Yeah, and that touches on the rental market as well. I mean, we don't really discuss the rental market, but it's just scorching here in Peterborough, and it's continuing to scorch because if you're not buying a home, generally you're going to be renting a home. So
Yeah,
excess demand in the rental market.
Yeah, it's still an affordable housing crisis. People who would be buyers are being forced to rent, and then you got your students, and yeah, I don't even know the numbers. I know we don't get into that, but it's somewhere around 1% vacancy rate, which is extremely low.
Extremely low. Yeah. Number of sales, we got an uptick month over month, so good to see there. Not really, major compared to what we saw in July. There, that's that big jump, or sorry, in June, that's that big bar that you see, which was kind of the record number of sales for 2023. So yeah, that was 118 sales back in June, and we did see a slight increase month over month from 68 to 74. And generally, I mean, that seems to be pretty typical, especially year over year. You look at those numbers there: 76 in July, we had 68 this July, 85 in August, and we had 74 this August. So relatively similar in terms of sales activity there. So that's your buyer demand, or kind of a general picture of buyer demand.
Yeah, and historically, the biggest closing day is the end of June. So if you're closing the end of June, you usually have to give the lawyers an extra week because there's a lot of activity happening.
And you see that too, which is neat. You see that in kind of the last 5 years. I mean, besides 2022, June seems to be the month with the highest number of sales for the year. So this one's kind of neat. This is a good measure of supply and demand because it's comparing the number of active listings to the number of sales for the month. So again, active listings are the number of homes that are left over at the end of the month, and number of sales are kind of self-explanatory. But essentially, we can look at the difference between that green and blue bar, and we can see kind of how the market is looking. If it's getting a little bit tighter, or maybe it's softening a little bit, we can tell based on a trend and looking at the difference between those green and blue bars. So we did see a slight increase because sales went up and number of new listings stayed relatively the same. So we did see a slight increase and the market slightly tightened month over month. Not huge, but it did slightly tighten.
Yeah, so you're just seeing there's more inventory out there for buyers right now, and there's definitely deals to be had in our market. But again, the buyers also being a little tentative, so that's why even the buyers that were looking at putting things on hold, find out what's going on with the economy. Obviously, waiting for the kids to go back to school, summer plans, and all of that. But you might see an emergence of the buyers here in the next couple of weeks. We're already seeing it, right? Just from personal experiences, some of my buyers are starting to reemerge. And I know you were saying the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, starting to see that. So again, it'll be neat to kind of track this because yes, we did see an uptick month over month, but what we're really looking for is trends. So are we going to see that number continue to decrease? And again, that's the delta between the number of active listings and then you subtract the number of sales, and then you get a value of essentially kind of you can track that number. If it's increasing, the market is softening. If it's decreasing, then the market is tightening.
You see it there.
And days to sell, a slight decrease there. So, I mean, what do you think that was from? I think it was 24 days to sell in July and 20 days to sell in August. So, what are your thoughts there, Dave? What kind of do you think caused that slight decrease in terms of days to sell? It's not major, it's about half a week, but it was a slight decrease.
Few things like we were talking offline. There's been a little bit more holding offers, and when you hold, it's usually a week or so. Sometimes they do the 2 weekends and they hold for 10 days or so. So those ones are selling pretty quick, and there's not a lot of sales, so something like that could really bring that number down slightly. What do you think? Is anything else contributing to it?
Yeah, I think that's really it. I mean, the holding for sure. I definitely saw a little bit more of that in August. And I think that's one of the major things because that really does impact the days to sell because generally they hold offers for about a week. Then the property sells. Now it's reported as 7 days on market.
Oh yeah, my other thought on that too is I find it takes, the sellers and the agent sometimes a little bit of time to catch up on the market. They might be looking at prices from last September, hoping, to get, 10% higher than the actual market value. But now that they're getting more educated, they're seeing more evidence of where the real price points are, that they're pricing a little bit more appropriately. Because there's a lot of properties just sitting because they were just overpriced. And maybe we're seeing them price just a little bit better.
Absolutely, yeah. And this one, I normally do a numerical value for the months of inventory, but I wanted to show it graphically because yes, we are still at 3 months of inventory, but we did see a slight decline month over month. So that is good to see. Again, it's similar to that active listings versus number of sales. This demonstrates that the market is slightly tightening. Not a huge amount, but it is slightly tightening. Again, we want to look for trends. Just because we see it 1 month does not mean that that's the story of the market. We kind of want to look for, trends of 3 to 4 months before we go ahead and claim something is shifting.
Right. Yeah, especially that jump 2 months ago was a bit abrupt. That just, and again, I know you watch this all the time. We always explain this, but it's your first time. Months of inventories, if the market was to freeze today at the current sales rate, would take approximately 3 months to burn through the inventory we have. Something like this is technically considered a seller's market, and it's usually not a buyer's market. Like it's about 6, and then 4 to 6 is more of a balance.
Yeah, around 4 to 6. So that's a good way to kind of keep track of what's happening in terms of seller and buyer sentiment is by looking directly at this months of inventory and going, yep, we're still kind of in a seller's market. Now we are pushing closer to balance, but we are still in a seller's market.
And that's what's make this market tricky to analyze because data like this says we're in a seller's market, but it definitely doesn't feel like that out there.
No. So this one's kind of neat. Again, we touch on this kind of every month now, but it's the price distribution. And what I did this month was look at the price distribution and compare it to last month. So we look at August and we compare it to July. So some big outliers there is the 500 to 550. So homes that sold between 500,000 and 550,000, it was 18% of the sales for the month in August. When we compare that to July, it was 12%. So a pretty big jump there. We also saw a huge jump on the other end of the scale with homes that are priced between 600,000 and 650,000. So if a home sold between $600,000 and $650,000, it was reported. And it was only 8% of the sales. Compare that to July, where it was 19% of the sales. So a larger increase in the entry-level product, which is their 500 to 550, and sort of a decline in the interest of your mid-range product, which is your 600 to 650. So kind of interesting to see there.
Yeah, to me, this is the most information we're getting on the market in this slide, because between the last two, that's 40% of the sales were above 600, and almost a third of them were above 700K. And we didn't have a lot of sales. So this means the higher price points ones are selling, but I actually think all of these are trending down. But it doesn't look like that, because where the sales are happening has shifted. And I think there's a lot of reasons, but we were talking about how some of the investment purchasing has cooled off because of the rates. So we get a lot of out-of-town interest in Peterborough, scooping up, student homes and whatnot, and that's slowed down a little bit just because some investors just can't get the financing in this economy. And then you have, as I said, a third of them sales here above 700K, and with only 70 sales, like that's going to pull your number up. But I think all of these markets prices for the most part are trending down. But this sample for this month and last month, just because the higher price points are now selling a little bit more, or it could be just that the lower aren't selling as much, and the upper ones are selling like they were, but they're just pulling the averages up.
Yeah, so they're inflating.
It's trending down, and it's because if you look at it just at a high level, it looks like things aren't going down as much. But I think looking at this slide, there's just been a shift on where the sales are.
Yeah, and that's why this slide is so important, because we can't just look at one number, which is the average price. We can't just look at that and go, oh, average price was down month over month, market's declining. We need to really do a deep dive into see what type of products are moving during that month. So that's why we really like to pay attention to this slide, because you can kind of see, okay, above 700,000, 31% of the sales. So yeah, it was 74 sales for the month. 31% of those were above 700,000. So that's going to push that average price up. And then you look at, okay, 5 to 550. 18% of the sales were 5 to 550. That's going to, again, bring that number down. So we can't just look at one number. We have to look at the price distribution to see, again, this is really a graphical representation of what type of products these buyers are preferring to purchase. That's a good way to look at this. If you're a seller, look at this and go, okay, if I price my home, over 700,000, if it's the same as it was in August, it's going to attract around 30% of the sales. So I should be able to sell my home, because there does seem to be an appetite for that type of product. There also seems to be an appetite under 600,000.
Yeah, and then if the rates, scared away investors, maybe there's another dozen sales in the 400s that will pull the average down significantly. So
yes,
again, our sample right now, because there's not a lot of sales, it can be easily skewed by this. Where when we have 150 to 200 sales, a little less, but definitely when you're in and around 70 sales, it can be really influenced by one of these categories.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, Dave, tell me about kind of some things to look for. So when you're buying a condo, again, we don't really touch on condos a lot in this podcast because we like to focus on freehold residential, which is different than a condominium. But it is different when you're purchasing a condo compared to when you're purchasing a house. So what are some things to look for when you are thinking about buying a condo compared to a house? So what are some things to look for if you're a buyer and you're thinking about getting a condo?
Well, first, I guess this is condos 101, but different from apartments and things. Like when you're an owner of a condo, you own a piece of the entire building, which also means you pay for the common elements. So if there's 100 people in a condo, 100 people do have their monthly fees, maintenance fees, and that does cover common space things. So such as, some of the nicer ones, you might have a pool, you might have an exercise room, party rooms, things like that, rooftop barbecue, but you're going to pay for that. And then some like there's sometimes condo ones that maybe they just do your recycling pickup, maybe they shovel your driveway and it's reflected, maybe maybe your monthly fee is closer to 300. But I guess the first thing to consider is when you're budgeting for your condo, you have to budget your maintenance fees, because you might be told you have a budget of 550 based on the purchase price. But when you do your monthly finances and you've got a $600 monthly fee, like that really skews, and maybe your spending power is 150K less when you actually look at your monthly ratios. So tip number one: always build your condo fees into your budgeting. And then the second one is, when you do an offer on a condo, this is on the buy side, you always want to have a review of the status certificate. What that is, it's a document where there's financial statements in it, which is the thing you really want to zero in. And you want to make sure that the finances for that condo and the reserve fund is very healthy. What could happen is the price looks right, maintenance fees look right, budget looks right, that's great. But if they don't have much of a reserve fund, and say the windows go, or there's an accident and that's not covered by insurance, or the roofs have to go, something deteriorates earlier, well, they use the reserve fund to pay for these kind of renovations. But there's not enough in the reserve funds, your fees go up, and they can go
And
up.
they can do,
They can go up significantly.
yes,
So,
and they can do something called a special assessment as well,
right.
which is just awful. So that is that situation. There's not enough money in the reserve fund. They can knock on your door and ask for a sum of money. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but essentially that's what a special assessment looks like. So always be prepared for that. And again, always have a lawyer review that status certificate to make sure that condo is healthy, because you're buying a piece of the building.
Yeah, and it's pretty standard. So in some cases, the sellers may already have a current one on hand, or they should, if they have a half-educated agent, they should let them know that this, most likely there's going to be a condition of reviewing this. And then usually you have to allot the right amount of time. If you haven't, this is a tip, I guess, on the sell side. Some of the maintenance companies can take a couple of weeks to produce a status certificate. So if you don't do that in advance, well, that condition is going to now tie you up for at least 3 weeks. It takes 2 to get it. You got to give them a week to review it. So it's always prudent to get that done in advance when you're selling, and the buyers will review it. It's good that their lawyer, as you mentioned, reviews the status certificate. There's other things in there too, like the rules of the condo and things like that. Like you may have a large breed dog that's not allowed in the building. And as you know, the one place where they can restrict animals is condos. They can't in residential rentals, but they can in condos. So you want to read those rules just to make sure. A little one I didn't know about this. Some buildings, they don't allow hardwood flooring on upper floors because of the sound. So you can be really disappointed.
And another big one is smoking.
Oh, yeah.
So if you do smoke cigarettes, there can be rules and bylaws in place in your condo where you're not allowed to smoke in your unit or your balcony, which is a huge rule because that balcony is considered part of the common elements. So I believe it's considered part of your common elements and not part of your unit. So you're not allowed to smoke on your balcony, even if you have a balcony in some cases. So if you are a smoker, definitely something to pay attention to.
Another little tip is the parking. So sometimes the parking is included with the fee, but sometimes it's not. Again, that can impact your budget. Sometimes you have to lease the spots separately. In most cases, at least one spot comes with it, but in some cases they're separate. So, and same goes for storage. Again, or maybe the storage isn't sufficient for you. So you want to definitely, when you're seeing the property, you want to pop down and check out the storage as well, and check out the parking area. But there's a couple more things to consider.
Absolutely. And always check to see what your condo fees cover. So there will be something in the MLS listing. I believe it shows up on realtor.ca, but if not, a realtor can answer the question for you. It's going to give you a list of services that your condo fees will cover. So you'll see parking in there. Sometimes they cover things like water. So definitely important to look at that and see what you're getting for that monthly payment. And another final note on buying condos, there's so many things we can discuss, but your common elements fee or your condo fee is pretty much guaranteed to go up every single year. So something to note there, they rarely go down year over year, very, very rarely. So keep in mind that number when you purchase that condo fee is probably going to be the cheapest condo fee that you'll pay during the life of your ownership. So definitely budget that in, and that will be reported from your property management or your owner as to what type of increase you might expect to see year over year.
And this is all transparent. There's condo committees. You can get on the condo committee and be involved in the decision making. And obviously, sometimes they have to vote, or sometimes the community's making decisions on your behalf. So depends how much you want to get involved. But so you should see these things coming, because the condo committee does meet and review finances.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, the deal of the month. You'll notice there we're in Keene. We're not in Peterborough. So that's weird. Because I thought this was a Peterborough show. So let me pull up the location to show you guys where this property is located. It's just outside of Peterborough. So you can see the east end of Peterborough right here. There's East City right here. You've got Beavermead Park right here, and you've got Lansdowne Street right here. So technically, I believe past television, this is considered Keene, but you're just outside of Peterborough. And the best thing about this location is Mark S. Burnham Park. You see these green walking trails right here. Fantastic forest, donated by the Burnhams, a very famous family in Peterborough. They donated this land and created a park. Awesome, awesome walking trail there. So not only is it a great location, but look at that price, $460,000. Now, yes, this property does need a bit of work, but the location and the land, it's just gorgeous. And both Linda Amor and Matt Murphy did a fantastic job marketing the property and pricing the property. But let me show you through the pictures here. So
how many acres, Alex?
I believe it's around 2 acres. Don't quote me on that. I have to double check, but I believe it's around 2 acres. Now, it does need a bit of work, but just gorgeous. Again, you're really purchasing the land. You've got the house already on here, and you can do some cosmetic renovations. Now, again, this is not advice because I'm not a home inspector, and I don't believe there was a home inspection with this property. So we would always recommend, if possible, getting a home inspection to see if there are any structural concerns or if there's any major renovations that need to be done, such as foundation or potentially asbestos or any environmental hazards in the property. But again, if it is all cosmetic, you can fix this up yourself. You can hire a general contractor, get it to how you want it, and you've got that country paradise for your property and just a great location and a double car garage.
Yeah, again, I'm not a contractor, but if you put the money in, I'd be pretty sure it would be a pretty good investment. As you said, location, 5 minutes from Peterborough. You got a little bit of land, you're not close to Peterborough. If you revitalize that home, again, I think it would be worth a significant amount more. And if you do the right kind of renovations, I think it could be a potential even investment opportunity.
Yeah, so it is sold as is. So something to note there. Yeah, sorry, I lied. It is not 2 acres. It's between half an acre and 2 acres. I believe it's just around 1 acre. But it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. You've got your furnace in 2022. You've got your roof in 2019. So some of those major upgrades have already been done. One thing to note about this property that is especially important, they are holding offers on September 12th at 1 p.m. So especially important there. If you are interested in this property, please reach out to Dave or myself, and we can take you for a private showing to show you the property, because you will need to put in an offer prior to September 12th at 1 p.m. if you are interested in this property.
It's another one in the books.
Yeah, another one in the books. It was a pleasure. Thank you for the insight and your time. I always love hearing your insight and what you have to say about the stats and kind of your thoughts on the market. So absolutely appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody watching does as well.
Well, I appreciate you doing the heavy lifting and putting the decks together.
No problem, brother.
Getting in the weeds.
Absolutely. Bit of macro.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I hope you cool off over there.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get an invite over to dip in the pool.
I hope so.
Yeah. But again, appreciate you, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you too, brother. Enjoy your September, and until next time, that's all, folks. Take care.